Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. William Shakespeare wrote the plays attributed to William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare wrote 37 plays, including but not limited to Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and like 15 plays about guys named Henry. On a related note, vaccines do not cause autism, Al-Qaeda did cause 9/11, Americans walked on the moon, and the Queen of England is not a lizard person. But people still believe these things. And some people believe in this one particular thing. And Captain Boom Everything, Roland Emmerich, believes in this one particular thing so much that he made a movie about it.
Well, Shakespeare!
Hello, Ben.
Fraud! Charlatan! A counterfeiter of wit!
The basic premise of this movie is Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was an aristocrat from a Puritan household that disdained poetry, so he had his many plays published anonymously, and credit was taken by a patsy named William Shakespeare, who was fat and stupid and dorky, and he smelled bad, and let's all throw rocks at him.
Just been...
And so this asshole took all the credit from this handsome blonde man with an incredible jawline, with the ability to talk like a smarty smart type person.
The sweet longings of a maiden, the surging ambitions of a courtier, the foul designs of a murderer, the wretched pleas of his victims. Only when I put their words, their voices to parchment, are they cast loose freed.
Ooh, isn't he dreamy? All hail Fakespeare. This movie, called Anonymous, is a dramatization of the authorship question. The authorship question is basically, who wrote the plays that William Shakespeare wrote? Was it William Shakespeare? I don't know. There are certain people who believe that Shakespeare's plays are so sophisticated, so erudite, so brain-crappingly good, that a middle-class kid from the Boondocks without a university degree couldn't possibly have written them. Why no one suspects the same of degreeless writers Maya Angelou, Truman Capote, Ray Bradbury, Mark Twain, and Charles Dickens is anyone's guess. Still, the belief goes that only someone with a vast education and a noble soul could have designed such masterpieces. They are so divine that even other poets can only sit in dumbfounded awe at their genius. Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Dekker, and Thomas Nash here are all experienced playwrights, but they all had to pick up their jaws off the floor after hearing about a play written entirely in verse.
I could do it if I wanted to.
Do what?
A play in by a play in Beck pentameter. It's not that hard.
Think you so? Have you ever tried?
Of course not. But I could if I wanted.
Well, it wasn't all in verse.
You see?
Alright, I need to explain how stupid this scene is. Jay-Z, Snoop Lion, and the RZA all walk into a bar. Jay-Z says, "Hey, you guys hear about this new kid, Kanye West?" And the other two go, "Yeah, I've heard the name." And then he goes, "Have you heard that he raps rhyming verse to a beat?" And the other two go, "What?" Shakespeare is too perfect not to be made by a perfect human. It is literary creationism. Shakespeare's plays tend to be about royalty and noblemen and feature things like tennis puns and mentions of falconry, and were about things like Italy and Denmark and other such things that only someone of noble birth could have possibly known about. Of course, whoever wrote these plays thought that Padua had a harbor, Bohemia had a coastline, France had lions, and ancient Rome had clocks.
His will famously left his second best bed to his widow, but it made no mention of a single book or manuscript.
And where is his birth certificate? So, you know, his will didn't mention any plays because he didn't own any plays. The playhouses owned them. Man, that was easy. Hell, this all goes out the window when you remember that plays have to be, you know, staged. The author, whoever he was, wrote parts for specific actors in a specific company that were designed to be staged in specific locations. And the nature of the plays changed with changes in cast and performance venues. So basically, the author would have to have worked closely with the King's Men for years, with deep personal investment and an understanding of their talents and limitations. They had to have been written by an actor in the company, and not an anonymous nobleman sending in his scripts in the mail. But how can Falcon if not posh? I don't like this. In case you couldn't tell. Regardless, the idea that Shakespeare couldn't have written Shakespeare has been held by some otherwise intelligent, insane minds. Sigmund Freud believed that the Earl of Oxford wrote them. Mark Twain believed that Sir Francis Bacon wrote them. If you saw Jim Jarmusch's newest movie, you'll know that he believes Christopher Marlowe wrote them, and that he was a vampire. I'm going to use the names that they've made up for themselves. Anti-Stratfordians. Anti-Stratfordians being people who do not think Shakespeare of Stratford wrote the plays. And apparently among their ranks are this doofus.
I believe Shakespeare matters after 400 years, and I hope that like my movie is part of, interests, like kind of people to go out there and see Shakespeare plays.
Guten Tag, Roland. Not gonna lie, Roland Emmerich made a crap movie. In other words, he made a Roland Emmerich movie. With all the trappings. A cast of thousands, a huge government conspiracy, one lone hero who saw it all coming. He even destroys a landmark. The Globe Theater. Because the White House wasn't built yet. But he is the last human being on Earth to tell this non-story. It's pretty well known that his bad science is more entertaining than his bad history. Still, without his tried-and-true plot of something bad happens and everyone has to react to it, he has no story. He just has the idea of, this dude is awesome.
Your voice is completely different from mine.
Voice! You have no voice! That's why I chose you!
The soul of the age, ladies and gentlemen. And he tells this non-story with a framing device of Derek Jacobi in modern-day New York, then jumping back in time to Ben Jonson being interrogated about Fakespeare, jumping back to Fakespeare himself in the process of becoming Fakespeare, then jumping another level deep to Fakespeare as a kid, learning all the things one needs to become Fakespeare, and then jumps back again where Tom Hanks talks about the true, and then again into Limbo, and he really has no clue what he's doing, does he? He's just jumping around location and time trying to woo an audience who doesn't know or care about the Earl of Oxford, or Robert Cecil, or the Earl of Essex, or Thomas Nash, or any person in this movie who isn't William Shakespeare or Queen Elizabeth I. It's a paradox. You have to know the period to understand what's going on. And if you understand what's going on, you will hate what's going on.
The Tudor rose. The most beautiful of flowers, do you not think?
It is a symbol. The red and white Tudor rose was a symbol. It is not, and has never been, a real flower. Holland doesn't like facts. He does, however, like theories. Pretty much all of his films hinge not on anything human or relatable, but on theories about aliens building the pyramids, or Area 51, or the Mayan 2012 prophecy, or global warming, which is unfortunate because it's the only one that's actually, true. You are not helping. Roland seems to enjoy these little thought experiments, although he has a tendency to caricature his designated conspiracy nut characters in a rather unflattering way, making them greasy, nerdy loners who have little shitty animations about their wild, stupid beliefs.
Of the planets in our solar system that only happens every 640,000 years.
Oh, not again.
Ha! That is ridiculous. What kind of tinfoil hat-wearing loony would ever make an animation like, I'm going to play a thing now?
The largest literary hunt in history produced not a single handwritten note of William Shakespeare. Strange, right?
Anyway, Shakespeare is posh dude because pores can't art good. So why does Roland believe this? Better question, why does anyone believe it? Simple. Absence of evidence mistaken for evidence of absence. We don't know much about Shakespeare's personal life. Any letters he wrote were lost to history, and the only sources about him that survive are very dull legal documents. Ledgers, court records, theatrical inventories, other such unromantic things. Things that don't speak to the life of a poet. Well, yeah, no one looks good if you only read their tax returns. For example, the documents showed that he, or at least his family in Stratford, had a side business selling malt, something the Romantics weren't wild about Shakespeare doing. A divinely inspired artist selling grain? How beneath him! No creative type has ever had the need to hold down a side job to make ends meet. Artists live on experience and dreams. Since we don't have much that speaks to the artistic life of William Shakespeare, we started looking to his plays to speculate about his nature, like building a whole dinosaur just from a footprint and a pile of fossilized dung. Bad metaphor. I'm not Shakespeare. Anyway, the logic behind this roughly goes as follows. We have a text called Independence Day. It is the story of an American president, an IT expert specializing in satellite technology, and an Air Force fighter pilot who hailed from America's three most powerful cities: political capital Washington, financial capital New York, and cultural capital Los Angeles. Cities which are destroyed when an invading alien force kabooms them until there is no more anything. Working together, the president, the engineer, and the pilot successfully destroy the aliens in a multi-pronged attack on their forces. Since everything about this work's creator, Roland Emmerich, has been lost to the ages, we can only speculate about his nature through the work itself. The focus is on America. We only see American cities get destroyed, and it relies heavily on reductive stereotyping to illustrate the rest of the world. And the ideological basis of the film is the lore surrounding the American holiday of Independence Day. Therefore, the director must be an American who has never been outside of the country. The writer has access to some very high levels of government. Otherwise, how could he have known about Area 51, let alone the inner workings of American government? We can surmise that the author was in the Air Force, since both its highest paid role and the fictional president himself are fighter pilots, and it is their skills which defeat the enemy. We can also guess that for a time he worked in telecommunications, for here he shows his familiarity with the subject to a great extent. Politically, the director must be a Republican, since the film was made during the Clinton administration, and he clearly wanted to make his president a war veteran, unlike the draft-dodging Clinton. He is also clearly Jewish, and quite possibly a little homophobic. And he married a stripper, with whom he had a son, and a daughter, and naturally, a beloved dog. Also, he was a Mac user. In conclusion, I demand that this Jewish-American tech-savvy Air Force general come forward with his 2 kids and his stripper wife and his dog and his MacBook Pro and tell us why Roland Emmerich's name is on his work. It's pretty much the same here. In 1920, J. Thomas Loney, his name is pronounced Loney, I'm disappointed too, published a book that first named Edward de Vere as the true author of Shakespeare. He found de Vere in a 16th century compendium of contemporary poetry, and yes, the guy did write poetry, and thought that he kind of read like Shakespeare, and he had titles and there wasn't any evidence of him caring about money, yet. So, he'll do. And as a bonus, his home life kind of resembled the plot of Hamlet. So, why not? Hamlet's autobiography now. De Vere was Hamlet, his father died when he was young, he had an unhappy marriage, not unlike Hamlet's relationship with Ophelia, and his father-in-law, Sir William Cecil, was a trusted advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, not unlike Polonius, who got stabbed by Hamlet. In the movie, Christopher Marlowe realizes this and reports Shakespeare to the Tower for dramatic treason, metaphorically killing one of Elizabeth's most trusted advisors on stage. So Shakespeare, in retaliation, kills Marlowe to silence him. Because Christopher Marlowe watched Hamlet. Hamlet was staged between 1599 and 1602. Marlowe died in 1593. The assumption that one has to live something before being able to write about something is nonsense, and a very modern way of thinking. Sure, plenty of modern-era authors use biography in their works. Mark Twain's time on Mississippi riverboats helped him realize the world of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. F. Scott Fitzgerald's tempestuous relationship with his wife Zelda lives on in the pages of The Great Gatsby. And Kurt Vonnegut's time as a World War II POW is written with vivid horror in Slaughterhouse-Five. Of course, Mark Twain freed exactly 0 slaves, F. Scott Fitzgerald wasn't a bootlegger, and Kurt Vonnegut was never abducted by aliens. But Shakespeare lived before biography was even a concept. Hell, he lived before biography was a word in the English language. Even if he did sneak in some of his own life, it would just be coincidental trivia. He wouldn't have thought to preserve his own experience in his fiction. And no one else preserved his experience in life. In a time pre-biography, no one really thought to hold on to the letters or journals or private accounts of people, at least if they weren't royalty. And certainly not if they were nothing more than a reasonably popular but far from divine South Bank entertainer. Which is why, Roland, we don't have any evidence of his handwriting. But it gets uglier. So Oxford bangs Queen Elizabeth.
I am with child.
The Virgin Queen was not a virgin. Also, FDR, totally faking it. Yes, Oxford is so beautiful at wording that he unvirgins the Virgin Queen, despite everything else we know about everything, and, well, it gets better.
Elizabeth had several bastard children, Edward. She was 16 for the first. The foundling, of course, had to be reared a nobleman, John de Vere, the previous Earl of Oxford, agreed to accept the task. He would teach you everything he knew about statecraft, marry you to his daughter, and after Elizabeth's death, proclaim you heir. His own grandchild to follow you on the throne, but he could not possibly predict what kind of failure you would become. All to write. Poetry. Nor could he have predicted that you would commit incest.
Remember how I said that Freud believed in this? In case you didn't follow that, Elizabeth had so many bastard kids, she lost track of them, and then she ended up stooping her random bastard baby and having a super inbred double bastard plopped into the world. Okay, I thought we were only dragging one legendary genius's name through the mud, but nope.
I can do what I want.
Her Majesty Eric Cartman I.
So, like, why even bring this up? Because the anti-Stratfordians hate your freedoms. I am not even lying.
J. Thomas Loney was part of the Religion of Humanity, a humanist secular positivist organization. Like, think the 19th century version of Scientology. Loney was basically an autocrat. He admired Elizabeth's top-down approach to government. And so did a lot of Oxfordians. And because conspiracy theories have a tendency to try to make the world into something that conforms to their own prejudices, someone cooked up a theory that Elizabeth birthed a secret Prince Tudor, a boy who could have continued the Tudor line after Elizabeth's death. If only the world had accepted this man as the genius that he was. Not only the soul of the age, but the savior of the monarchy. An inbred baby bomb that would have kept the slimy Scots off the throne and prevented all those pesky things that got in the way of the aristocracy, like the Civil War, and losing the colonies, and democracy, and modernism, and the world would be brought into a glorious despotism under the Tudor reign. All hail Prince Tudor.
Of course, I don't think Emmerich believes all that. I don't think he really thinks about the implications of the theories he espouses, he just says them.
Sure, superficially it's harmless. We don't know anything about Homer, but we can still appreciate the Odyssey. Why can't it be the same for Shakespeare? I've talked a lot about our relationship to text, but do we really need a relationship with the author? Who cares if it was written by an aristocrat or a Glover's son? Can't we simply enjoy the work?
And I'm honestly all for that. Death of the author. I would love to live in a world where I could separate the creator from the creation.
I'd love to live in a world where Dancer Taking a Bow wasn't painted by a vicious anti-Semite, and Imagine wasn't written by an inveterate wife-beater, and Annie Hall wasn't directed by a monstrous child rapist.
I would love to live in that world. But these people don't want to believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare because he doesn't have a bachelor's?
Hey! Pah! That illiterate lowlife bangs prostitutes! Unlike this man who has done nothing bad with his dick ever!
Well, here's a thought. Maybe Emmerich doesn't believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare because Emmerich can't see himself as Shakespeare.
At a few points in the movie, we get montages of the various plays that Shakespeare wrote, and, well, look at how they're staged.
God be with you all!
Special effects extravaganzas full of broad comedy for the unwashed masses. Reminds me of a certain director.
Also relevant, Roland Emmerich was quite rich growing up. His father made a fortune founding a gardening tool company, and Emmerich spent his youth traveling Europe and America living fat off his father's wealth. He went to film school, made some well-received shorts, and then barged into Hollywood as an artist that had not known genuine hardship, making a living attempting to connect with the populace that he can only understand through broad, ugly stereotype. And so, his Shakespeare is an elite artist talking down to the groundlings. I think, deep down, he only believes in Shakespeare trutherism because he wants the truth to reflect himself. Roland Emmerich wants to believe that he is Shakespeare. Go ahead. Laugh. No, seriously, laugh. Like right now. Loud, long, clear. Ha 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 ha. I want to hear you through the internet laughing right now. Roland Emmerich sees himself as Shakespearean. Is that not hilarious? Now stop laughing. Because, guess what? We all want to see ourselves as Shakespearean. Because strip everything away and you realize that we have no Shakespeare. He does not exist. His personal effects lost to history, stories of his character missing from the archives, his works. His works are all we have, and his works are, quite simply, everything. His 37 plays, his 154 sonnets, his epic poems cover so much of history, of philosophy, of folklore, of human character, that Harold Bloom once called him the world's only universal writer. No wonder he's quoted by everyone! And because of his breadth, we can conceive of his plays in every possible mode. As bombastic and hip, as casual and breezy, as brutal and fascist, as soft and fantastical, as sleazy and pornographic, as youthful, as ancient, as futuristic, as European, as Asian, as African, as American, as lowbrow and common, and, yes, as noble and authoritarian. Jacoby starts this movie by mockingly using this phrase.
Our Shakespeare, rise. Our Shakespeare. For he is all of ours, is he not?
Our Shakespeare. But what more perfect phrase can be used? Shakespeare is our Shakespeare, whether you think he was the man from Stratford or not. Emmerich Shakespeare is a privileged mass entertainer because Emmerich is a privileged mass entertainer. Just as Whedon's Shakespeare is a breezy communalist, as Jarman's Shakespeare is a mad alchemical hermit, as my Shakespeare is... I'm not sure who my Shakespeare is. But I do know that he's mine. And he's yours as well. But as this month comes to a close, maybe you have a better idea of who your Shakespeare is. I think I'm going to do this next year.
Brush off your Shakespeare, and they'll all cow, forsooth. And they'll all cow, think style. And they'll all cow, we trow. And they'll all cow.